I like playing end games. I won lots of points in the end games over the last few years. When I was little, I used to lose points in the end game, but then I learned, and eventually I'm becoming the one who gains half points, whether it be drawn games won or sometimes even lost games drawn. And one of my favorite themes in the end game is rook. When the rook is on the wrong side of the pass pawn, somehow that has in rook endgames that has always fascinated me, and the main reason for that is the game I'm going to show you right now. My game against the Czech Grandmaster Racek in the German Bundesliga in 2007. So if we were to switch around the positions of the rooks here, let's just put the white rook on b2 and the black rook on b8. The position would be an easy win for white, since the black rook is completely immobile, and we can just march over it with the king. Obviously, with the rooks in the places that they actually are, this is not possible, because then the white king will simply be checked. So something more clever is needed, and I really like the idea that happened in the game. So here I played the king to d6. Obviously black needs to protect the e5 pawn, otherwise this cluster of pawns will quickly become pretty mobile. So he protected it with a king. It should be noted that if he protects the pawn with the f pawn, I will simply play rook to e8, rook takes b7, rook to e7, rook takes, king takes, with an easily winning pawn endgame. For instance, king to g6, king to f8, there's nothing to do except push the pawn. Takes g4. If the king moves backwards, I just go king to g8, forces king away again, and then grab the pawn, so he has to go forward, but then once again he's not in time, and now it's important just to play king to f5 rather than capture any of the pawns, and wherever he goes I capture the pawn the same way as the black king goes. So he played king f6 instead, which is the only chance. And now quite a bit of imagination is required to win the game. Obviously, rook h8, rook takes b7, rook h6, king g7 is not enough, because I need to move the rook. I cannot take this pawn, and my extra pawn would be basically meaningless. So instead, already a long time ago, I had found this idea, but obviously I needed to verify whether it actually worked. So I played f4. I remember one of my teammates, Peter Svidler, he told me after the game he didn't know what I was doing, whether I was trying to lose the game, but then when he saw my idea, he sort of calmed down. So he has no choice but to take it twice. And now comes the point of my idea, rook to g8. And obviously with the point rook b7, e5, and checkmate. So he has only one option, which is rook to b6, rook takes b7, king takes b7. and now f3. There are a couple of ways for white to win here, but by far the most elegant, I think, was the way that I chose, which is the same idea again. King to c6, and if he advances with the pawn, king to d6, and once again is checkmate. So instead he chose king to e5, but now e8, king f4, king d5, and rook to f8 on the next move. It's completely lost. So I guess it is quite a bit better to have the rook behind the passed pawn than in front of it. But this game goes to show that there are many resources, and that even in simple endgames it's often possible to play for a mate. And that is one of the fascinating things really about endgames. And every time I have the possibility since to get the rook in front, I'm always looking for getting the rook in front of the pawn and trying some theme like this, because the nice thing about having the rook in front of the pawn is that the opponent's rook can never move away from that particular file, because then the rook will move away and the pawn promotes. So it decreases your options, but also decreases your opponent's options. So remember always to look for checkmate even in endgames.